afternoon, everyone. My name is Maura Keefe. I'm a scholar in residence here at Jacob's Pillow Dance Festival. Welcome to Pillow Talks. For those of you familiar with the grounds of Jacob's Pillow and Blake's Barn and summer space behind me, you might recognize where I am. Today's talk is the first of 11 Pillow Talks that will be shared online every Friday at 4 o'clock. And Pillow Talks will also take place outside here starting on Sunday, July 4th. Get free tickets for those online through the box office. This is, to my mind, a kind of a perfect talk to launch the online Pillow Talk series. And let me explain. Jacob's Pillow has been building its digital presence for more than a decade with Jacob's Pillow Dance Interactive. Excerpts from performances, talks, and interviews are posted online. They're free for people all over the world. This idea of capturing moving images on film has been part of Jacob's Pillow's history from the first moment when Pillow founder Ted Shawn collaborated on an early film with Thomas Edison. The archives at Jacob's Pillow are noteworthy. Dance's history is available to you from last week, from last year, from last century. But today we're doing something completely different for Jacob's Pillow. Jacob's Pillow is co-commissioning a new work called, for now, Starve the Algorithm. It won't take place, however, on the Ted Shawn Theater stage. Rather, it's going to take place on a digital realm. It's a collaboration between William Kentridge and Future Perfect Creative Studio, and they're here today to talk about the project. I'm going to introduce them building out from the Pillow here in Beckett, Massachusetts, first to New York. Wayne Ashley is the founder and artistic director of Future Perfect Creative Studio. He has worked directing, producing, and curating hybrid projects for more than 20 years at venues such as the Seattle Art Museum and Brooklyn Academy of Music. He has a background in dance and theater and a doctorate in performance studies. Xander Sarin, also in New York, is the co-artistic director of Future Perfect Creative Studio. He came to Future Perfect with a background in software development and music composition. He's presented work at venues such as MoMA's PS1, and he's the founder and curator of the collective and web-based initiative, The Actual School. And now on to London. William Kentridge is quite simply an artist. His work spans artistic media such as drawing, performance, film, printmaking, sculpture, and painting. He has also directed acclaimed operas and theatrical productions. Awards and honors include honorary academician at the Royal Academy in London, the Kyoto Prize from Japan, the Oskar Kokoschka Award from Vienna. He's had exhibitions around the world at the Kunstmuseum in Basel, Switzerland, Whitechapel Gallery in London, the Louisiana Museum in Copenhagen, exhibitions in Beijing, Seoul, Venice, and along the banks of the Tiber River in Rome. You can follow him on Instagram at William Kentridge Studio. You can also see websites, William Kentridge Studio and Future Perfect Studio. So thanks for being here. I am delighted that we are kicking off our online series with a conversation about what's happening in the digital realm. An enormous task in some ways today. We've been thinking a lot about digital media, virtual performances, especially over this past year. So much experimentation has happened with artists around the world thinking about, well, if we can't be in the theater live with audiences or with each other, what can we do? And what does that mean for the past of performance, what's happening right now, and the future? But before we talk about the project that you're working on specifically, I would like to back up to a little prehistory. And William, I'd like to start with you. One of the things that I have been finding fascinating in reading about your work and seeing your work is your impetus to include and incorporate whatever the project determines that it needs as you're making it. And so while some people being an artist might mean more familiarly the charcoal or the paint that you work with, for you it's always also included animation and film. Could you talk a little bit about how you learned to trust that those different kinds of media could work together and that they would serve your projects?
Yes, I mean, when I started as an artist or as an art student, the view was very clearly you should focus on drawing or you should focus on filmmaking. Just if you want to master a technique, work in one thing. And it took me a long time to unlearn that, to understand that in fact the drawings were helped. New drawings emerged if I was also making on a film. Drawings emerged that I would never have thought of if I was just in the world of film. The world of drawing and the gestures of drawing transformed the way to think about what it is to make a gesture on stage. So I'd started off making drawings, then animated films, and put those films in behind actors on stages. So that sense of shifting from what it is to make a drawing to what it is to make a performance happened almost of itself. And I gave up trying to think I was someone who made drawings or someone who made films or someone who made theatre. The only hope was for this mash and migration of images from one form into another. In the hope, as it is with all translation, that you learn from the language you're translating into the language you're speaking, rather than squashing one into the other.
So then the realm of digital media, did it really just feel like yet another step in the film animation spectrum for you? Just another medium to explore?
Well, the animation that I do is extremely analog. I mean, it's charcoal drawings filmed and recorded, but these days, in the last few years, it's been recorded digitally and not on a 35 millimeter film. And certainly for the last decade and a half, decade and a half of the editing has been digital. So that sense of the flexibility that you get from that transforming an analog form into a digital form, working with it and exporting it again in an analog way, is there. But I'm not someone who knows computer games. I'm not someone familiar with the gaming world. But I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued by what are its limits and what can it do. And this also comes from a wider interest in artificial intelligence, in the idea of what can a machine do and what can a human do. How like a machine does a human become, and vice versa. But I'm intrigued to know what the form, and I start with some skepticism, but as we work through each stage and I start working with particular wonderful technicians, or more than technicians, I'm gradually being drawn in. And I don't know if this is an awakening to some new possibilities or a lessening of resistance to this world. I have a kind of a horror of thinking of myself as an artist on a computer. For me, it has to be standing on your feet at the wall in action.
I'm going to ask you about that, but I want to bring Wayne and Xander into the conversation and actually kind of give an introduction to the Future Perfect Creative Studio. You describe it as a transdisciplinary creative studio and research collective based in Brooklyn, New York. And you say you create unique, groundbreaking experiences across digital media, visual arts, live performance, and emerging technologies. I want to first start just with the word transdisciplinary. So we've gotten 4 words into your description of yourselves, and I want to stop. How do you define that, and what's with the prefix of trans there? Maybe Wayne, you start, and then Xander, you'll join in.
I mean, I can say since I was in high school, the whole area of performance and body-based performance has been undergoing a lot of transformation and a lot of expandedness, so that the body was just not only restricted to dance, but also now included film. It was part of the whole expanded film movement. It included visual art. It included text. So already at a young age, I was being opened up to the fact that all kinds of media did not have to be restricted to one particular form, one particular genre. And there was an opportunity to see how all of those could begin to create a certain kind of dialogue. And so I've always been interested in a dialogue between different kinds of media. At a young age, the computer has opened up more and more this possibility for people from completely different disciplines. In the last 25 years, I've had more conversations with architects, with engineers, with software developers, with scientists, mostly because of the whole area of computation I've ever had in my life. And so I'm very interested in creating opportunities from people that are outside of the art discipline, outside of the art discourse, to create situations where we can really begin to expand continue to expand what the notion of performance is. And that ultimately we're not trying to create just theater, we're not trying to create just another dance piece, but because of the bringing together these people from different histories and different ideas, We're starting to make things that sit in between all of these things. And that's what that's what I refer to as trans. It's not theater. It's not it's not a music concert. It's not an animation, but it's somewhere in between all of those. And that's what becomes incredibly exciting, that the whole kind of boundary is being opened up between all of these separate disciplines.
Yeah, I got out my Latin dictionary, a crossover and beyond. That's how the trans can be translated. So Xander, maybe you tell us.
We always had. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was saying, there's always, I remember from high school Latin, there was Cisalpine Gaul and Transalpine Gaul. That part of Gaul that was this side of the Alps, and that side that was across. So it's about crossing. So we're going from the cis medium into kind of a trans medium, crossing the Alps of where mediums refuse to go.
And that's where, and let me just say before you go, and that's where I feel like what we're doing at Future Perfect Creative Studio and what William has been doing for decades now, why I feel there's such a sympathy between our efforts to constantly be creating dialogues across media.
So yeah, I mean, this is actually, maybe Xander, you can tell us about the first date. Tell us about when you, even before the kind of discovery sessions, how did the conversation start between Future Perfect and William?
Yeah, so for Wayne and I, the spark was the pandemic and all of our projects being put on hold, and then trying to think through and really reinvestigate an interest that we've shared for a while, which is immersive digital experiences and what those might look like as technology has kind of transformed over the last 10 years with development of game engines and all these different tools that have emerged. And so we initially just started a conversation with William and just to kind of explore if there could be some resonance across, our interests and his. And we felt before talking to William that his work was super aligned with, how we were imagining this stuff could look and feel like.
So you knew his work as an artist. And so you thought, we do this trans stuff. He's been doing this trans stuff for decades. Let's see if there's something to have together. We
also didn't work with someone that came out of the gaming industry or came out of digital media or was not a digital artist, because we wanted to work with someone who has a long history of thinking about these kinds of debates across media in very complex ways. And we wanted William to really challenge us. We wanted him to challenge all the assumptions about what these various industries have implemented or templatized. We really wanted William's critical voice in what we imagined could happen and to see what alternative ways he would come up based on his own history.
You did these things that you call discovery sessions, where you sort of said, like, here are some things we can do. What was that kind of show and tell like?
Yeah, that for me was kind of vital to actually understand. Because otherwise, if you just see the result, here's something in a game engine, here's a piece of a computer game, to not actually understand how it is, not in detail, but roughly how it is constructed, to understand where I would place myself within that for the work to start happening. So it's about workflow, it's about different kinds of either scanning something and then realizing it and then being able to move it and then move around. I mean, the basic grammar of what it is to be in the digital world, moving through it in a visual way. But for me, it's always important to have a kind of a theme that's broader than the immediate project, but to have that, a theme that's interesting, and then to have the material in which to think about it. And I've been interested for a long time in the edge of the mechanical and the human, or the automaton. There's a great novel from a Soviet novel written in 1927 by Yuri Olesha called Envy, which I'd come across. And in this, there is a short description of a machine, a perfect machine, like a contemporary robot, but it can do everything. It can blow up the Eiffel Tower, it can cook your breakfast, it can make your bed, it can do whatever you require of it. And it's kind of it's a very Soviet image, this machine, that the mechanized world that can do everything. But then, and this is the key part, the person who's made this machine describes it to one of the other characters, and his words are, he says, and then the machine is called Ophelia, has been called Ophelia. And he says, and then Ophelia, the slut, the bitch, goes and falls in love and starts singing sentimental songs, and the whole machine project starts to fall apart. So that's the one side, which I'm intrigued by. The other was in the same time. This is the 1920s, the time of Pavlov. This is the edge of thinking, how can nature be reshaped to fit in with the Soviet image? And this is Trotsky writing in the 1920s. And he's writing, I suppose, about the fallibility of human beings to be inadequate to the social project they were involved with. And he said, if only we can solve that part of the human machine known as psychology, then we'd be able to make perfect people. So from each side, you have this machine, human, not meshing, not being able to do what people wanted. And that's the interesting part for me, the glitches in a grand plan, the periphery from which one can glimpse new things.
And I was going to say that's another reason why we felt that William was the perfect artist to start thinking through these things, because he has a critical voice, but he also has an historical voice, and that working with these kind of technologies and these kind of utopic and dystopic ideas about humans and machines are not just of the 21st century. These are also repeated in other historical moments throughout centuries. And I think it's important that we have the opportunity to look historically back at other moments of political, social, and radical transformation to see where machines and humans fought or collaborated with one another to shed light potentially on what our current economic, political, and artistic debate is with machines in the 21st century.
I'm so glad you say that, because I think that there's often anxiety among people who think of live performance as something that is unincorporated with technology, and they forget about trapdoors and fly space and theatrical lighting. So technology has always been present, and so this isn't a new concern. And so what you're saying about William's perspective on the historical feels particularly useful for maybe even calming the anxiety down of people who are afraid of what performance might look like on the digital realm. But I'm thinking from your perspective, Wayne and Xander, when you were putting together the Discovery sessions, and I'm imagining the folks that you work with are completely fluent in the language of avatar, digital assets, those kinds of terms. But now you're talking to somebody who philosophically and aesthetically aligns with you, but maybe isn't in the same kind of language and grammar. Did you think about how to use a different kind of language to do a presentation or to guide the Discovery sessions?
Yeah, the people we brought in are colleagues of ours that either we've known for a while or have been in conversation with over the last year, 2 years, and so really it was an extension of that, of us engaging with them and really giving the time for these sessions to happen. I think the importance of taking that time and really studying each component in terms of what we saw possible across motion capture and game engines and volumetric video and all of these different tools, and really digging in to those things with the right framing.
Yeah, and we had a sense that part of William's process is pragmatic, and he's very concerned with material and the material of all of these things. And so it was important for us to present that and kind of go through the skepticism and to go through the possibilities, but to really do it from a very specific instantiation of what the horizons of this technology are and what the limits are, and to really be able to engage with William in debates about what we like, what we don't like. Does this do this? Does this do that? Well, what if we look at 3D scanning of whole buildings, and how does that impact? Or if we look at volumetric capture of humans, well, what does that do to thinking about performance? So it was immensely important, and we knew that we wanted to take the time to go through a kind of deep series of sessions where we could debate and confront what is possible and what's not possible.
So William,
Interesting. Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, you already said that you were a little skeptical and were willing to deal with your skepticism, but is it fair to say that you are comfortable as an artist of the unknown, so that wasn't the question for you?
Yeah. There are different things. I work with a team of designers that I've worked with for years in opera and theatre, who were a little bit horrified when I said to them, we're going to explore the digital. So there's been a behind the scenes, me bringing a whole group of people along into it. And we've been working on a number of way of thinking about film. Before we were thinking about the digital medium, but there's an interaction between different projects that we are doing. And now it's an interesting thing. We started working with quite rough cardboard costumes, putting people so their movements are kind of restricted, a bit like a kind of early game show, early video game, rough avatar that can move quite. And what we've done while filming is you discover there are fantastic movements that are coming out. So we have two things. On the one, there's an excitement of what we're seeing that we're making, which makes everybody say, okay, this has to have a live component also. I mean, a physical live component on a stage in a theatre, using some of these discoveries. And then the challenge is, or the interesting is, yes, we've got that, so we know what that looks like on the stage. What is it going to be, and what else will it be when it's in the digital realm and has a whole set of other possibilities brought into it? So it's a little bit of a trompe-l'oeil. Can we get our avatars to do what our humans are doing? But also, can we get our humans to do what a simple computer avatar is doing? So we make a complicated costume to make it look like a simple computer-generated costume. And I think there's going to be a very interesting, what it is when you've got this complete avatar, but you take off your cardboard head and there's an actor there, both on the live stage and on the other. And at this stage, I haven't decided, okay, this we only see in the digital realm, this would be if it's being done on stage, this goes across both. I mean, there are fantastic things to do in the digital realm we can't do on stage, and there's things you can do on stage that you can't appreciate in the digital realm.
Before I even ask you to describe the project itself, let's look at just some motion capture footage of, so this is working footage that you, and this is all in process. Nothing is ready for audiences to be seeing, and it's just to give us some background and insight. So if we can look at the first clip, please. So that is just a brief excerpt of some of the motion capture work happening. And I picked those two sections for a reason that has to do with me being such a fan of human movement in the actual materiality of the body. So and it's a beautiful shot, whoever set that up, that we can see the computer screen and the dancer's feet at the same time. But also, I wanted to end with the part where we see William, because you are moved by the movement. You are watching what she's doing. And you've talked about how embodiment is an important part of your artistic practice, that art making for you is thinking through the body. It's a practical activity, not sitting and thinking. So could you just talk about like what it has meant for you to have the performers in space and feeling a connection with them? We don't see in that excerpt, for example, you standing near the computer and being inspired.
So this was our very first test of motion capture, to see what we could get, how fluid the capture was. Was it going to be very jerky, or would it be fluid? So it was an encouragement of Lulu Mlangeni, the dancer, to really move quite fluidly and quite fast to see if it could catch up. Having seen that, we understand, in fact, the motion capture can be very accurate and can get a lot of nuance of a shimmy, a shift of the hips, of the shoulders. It can catch all of those things. Which brings us to the second stage, then what do we want that to be? We certainly don't want it to be that wooden kind of cutout that one saw on the computer. And that's in a way what the puppetry and the cardboard costumes and all of those things are working towards. Can we take a material that looks like it shouldn't move at all like that, and that can move like that, and to see what that is? So we're at the beginning of that exploration. We haven't yet had the delight of saying, okay, now we know kind of what we can capture and how we can scan an object, a costume, and piece, and put those two together. That's going to be kind of fantastic. And then when we can having seen that, can work with the performer and the avatar kind of live, then we're going to kind of have a magic. Then you could imagine you have your dancer on the stage and a screen right next to it, and that kind of interaction of the dancer plus avatar. So it may be in the final digital world, the avatar is a three-dimensional object you can circle, and the live human is something that you can only see as a projection.
For those of us who are familiar with motion capture work that maybe Merce Cunningham was working with in the mid-90s, resulting in a work called Biped, sensors that looked like ping pong balls on people's bodies, cameras all around the room. What's the difference between that technology and what we're seeing there in the suit the dancer is wearing?
Well, first of all, the computer speeds have become quicker. There are new technologies now where you don't need the balls, where the computer vision is able to make a difference between the background and the foreground. And so you often don't need all the apparatus connected to the body. And they're able to pick up, like William was saying, incredibly subtle nuances of the body and how the body works. But for me, what will happen, and I think this is what William and us will discover, is what's been called digital puppeteering. The fact that there's a long tradition of humans not being seen and in the background and manipulating objects, and the audience seeing these objects and imagining all kinds of scenarios with the humans removed. And I think there's a continuity between humans in the background actually in real time, live, manipulating these digital avatars that have a continuity with a whole puppeting tradition.
Let's talk about this project. It's called, for now, Starve the Algorithm, a defense of the flesh. So how did you come up with that title, and what are you defending in this? Maybe William, you start.
Yeah, I don't know, I'd forgotten the subtitle, Defending the Flesh. So it starts as a kind of challenge to myself, I suppose, to say, can one make something with this form that one couldn't put on stage, that has a different presence and has a different meaning in the end because of that? how analog can one make the digital world in a way? Can one keep the sense of contact we have of flesh in this other world? It's a challenge. I've no idea whether one can. Partly it has to do with, can one keep the roughness of the cardboard and collaged photostats of the world that we are creating? Can we find something that doesn't feel like the computer games I've seen? That's my fear, that suddenly turns into a computer game in which not much happens. There's no one to shoot up, there's no worlds to explode. We can't try to be in that terrain, but if you're not in that terrain, what are we in? This is what we're going to discover.
So in the initial concept, we can, which we will see right now, you can see this analog or maybe even almost homemade quality. So let's look at that, and then Wayne, I'll ask you to say something about the title as well.
Starve the algorithm, by which we mean try to retain some data for ourselves. That our lives, our desires aren't all chosen by the avatars walking up and down in the corridor outside this room. It may be a vain hope, now that even Go players' intuition is outthought and intuited by a series of computations. We have to hope for a glitch in the system. We have to hope for a glitch which is more than a predictable glitch constructed by the very avatars themselves, by the very engine of the digital itself, and proclaim the absurd, the irrational, the impossible is where we can find ourselves. Not in the hope of avoiding the world, but in the way of proclaiming we are more than predictions claim us to be, even as we know that we are less than these predictions themselves.
So what we see in that footage is something that that looks like you built it out of paper and cardboard and cut it with an X-Acto knife, and that I'm imagining some sort of tiny camera going through a cardboard model. Could you talk a little bit about the kind of, even just give us a sense of the scale? Am I right?
Okay. So you're correct. This is a tabletop model. In fact, even the more elaborate ones are built of cardboard on the tabletop. And it uses just the camera on one's cell phone, which is as the camera moving through. For other filming, we use a slightly more sophisticated. Well, it was really to see what does it look like if you go into different rooms in the different worlds. Someone talking, another room which is just shadow. So that's like the 20-minute test. And then there was the 2-week construction of cardboard models, and then the scanning of that model into a digital form. And so within the cardboard model itself, that's what there's a whole other realm to think about filmmaking. Not so much digitizing the traditional filmmaking, but with the world reduced to that scale. And then it gets expanded into the digital world where it can be as enormous as you want it to be. But to have the sense of going through something that has been made.
So, Wayne, could you say something, or Xander, about starting from the cardboard and what that, I'm thinking of just the very last image we saw of the working model for the motion capture. That looks computer generated, and then we land here in a world made of cardboard and paper. So what did you think of starting with that kind of texture for the initial explorations of the idea?
For us, the 3D scanning possibilities were one of the most interesting things to start with, because of William's physicality with his work, and being able to take something that he's building in a studio and scan it and still have that texture and retain the qualities of it, and not not go the route of kind of glossy game assets that people are familiar with in digital worlds. It was a much more compelling starting point for us. And really experimenting with, can we retain the texture? Is it possible for us to, manipulate the objects and the form in ways that allow for an experience that retains some of that physicality?
I think just these initial tests. I think that they were extremely successful. We paid very specific attention to how do we get the most tactile, and that's the thing that we so much appreciate in the way William works, is even in his animations and the way he creates animations and the way he creates installations, there's a tactile quality that is so visceral. And we like the challenge of being able to create this whole large scale virtual world that you not only watch, but you can enter into, and you can navigate through the image and still have this very visceral, textural, tactile experience. So the way we scanned it, the way we did post-production on it, all of it was to retain William's tactile quality.
So one of the things, and I guess that I will almost begrudgingly admit to having even a kinesthetic experience with the initial concept film of this version we just saw, of feeling like I was being drawn in a kind of miniature way. And then William, seeing your full body there speaking, I had a kind of, oh, it's back to life size. And could you talk a little bit about the sense of scale and proportion that you're playing with in some of the images that you're choosing?
Most people, I guess, if it's in the digital world, will be looking at it kind of on the scale we're looking at television screens or computer screens here. So we're in a miniature world. To some extent, the scale is given just by the height of your camera, what is the viewpoint from which you're seeing it. But I think we do want to play with the sense of, I'm in a world just of cut cardboard. I can see this is the size of a page, so it is a miniature world. And then at times it expands out and, oh, there's a person that feels of ordinary scale. So there's not as if there's a philosophy or a principle or a decision or saying this is what we want to do. It's very much saying, let us see what this process does and throws up. So it's interesting that for you, I'm hearing from you that you had that sense of shifting of scale, rather than me saying, oh, I want the scale to be A and then I want it to feel like B. I think the interest in it is, and the hope and the belief, just from the small tests we've done, that there will be discoveries for us that we can't anticipate now, and ways both of working and of thinking that are much more than if we had to write down now exactly what I think we're going to see and what we're going to do. Even that fragment that you saw just now of the people in their paper costumes with their cardboard cutout heads in front, give a whole new way of thinking about who can be inside the model, what they can be doing, how they will be doing it.
Xander, I want to go back to you, because I think you, with your background in computer coding, I've been thinking about the starve the algorithm, and if you feel yourself starved in this, like that things aren't going to be left up to the kind of world of coding that would be making choices, or how you are relating to that part of the title.
I think I share in the skepticism. I think my background with computer programming is, I would say, based in skepticism. I kind of am interested in inviting that process into a space that maybe is seen as either, as Wayne brought up earlier, either dystopic or utopic. I think the spaces in between are much more interesting to me. The kind of nuance that emerges of questioning what the computer can do and what the limitations are, and the relationship to the human body, and yeah, I share in the starting of a point being skepticism.
So before we look at the participant demo, which will be the next clip we'll see, I wonder, Wayne, if you could say, that, you described this in the project description as a live online immersive performance, and it's going to use for the first time your platform Expand Live. So what does that mean, live, immersive, online? Like in some ways, those words don't usually get grouped together as happening at the same time, that we feel like either we stay home and watch a performance on a computer or we buy tickets and go to the theater. And you're saying it's going to all happen online, but still be live.
Again, the pandemic was the impetus for us to, I mean, Sandra and I have been involved in thinking about live performance. I mean, we've done stage performance, we've done installations, we've done underwater music concerts, we've done robotics. We're very invested in live performance and the different contexts that live performance can exist. The pandemic really threatened us to close down our live performance practice. So where can live performance continue to exist, and how can it be reinvented or reconstituted or reframed? And so online space became one of those sites where live performance can continue to exist. The history, as I've experienced it, of performance and technology has been video and cinema. And so there's been a long history between capturing live performance and then re-showing it or rethinking it as a cinematic experience or as a video, all of which can be very exciting. And there's been whole new cinematic languages evolved around live performance, but it's mostly been watching as a kind of passive experience. What these 3D environments do is allow you not only to watch, but to engage, at least metaphorically, kinetically, by entering into the work, seeing different, changing the perspective of the work, guiding yourself through the work, and making discoveries inside of the work as a 3D environment. And that these are performed live so that they can be improvised, they can change from one night to another. There are all kinds of capabilities in an interactive live performance that's distributed to hundreds of people in different parts of the world that you can't do by simply watching a streaming video of a performance.
So let's look at the participant demo, and then I will ask you more about that.
So here we have the participant experience walkthrough. Have it so we arrive in the studio, and we can see the miniature, kind of a work in progress miniature. As we come around here, we get to see that there's an extended world, and when we pass through here, we are inside the miniature. Careful attention has been given to reconstruct all the assets, try and bring back all the crisp detail, paying attention to the construction methodology, the language of the world is being tried. We try to preserve that.
But to try to find a safe room, a safe space in which to hang on to the most embarrassing parts of ourselves. The exit is to the left. Exit.
Wayne, describe to us what we just saw.
What you just saw is taking William's exquisite cardboard models, scanning those in a process called photogrammetry, and turning those into three-dimensional assets, taking those assets and putting them in the Unreal game engine, and then expanding the experience and giving the sense of not only looking at the model, but now entering into the model and being able to actually decide which way to go, which way to travel, which things to focus on, which things to attend to, which things to ignore. And so from my perspective, there's a different kind of kinetic relationship to the image, which you can now navigate and curate yourself rather than someone telling you which way to go and simply watching. And so what you've seen is that experience as a 3D interactive model that's virtually presented on the internet. It's only a test. It's the tip of the iceberg.
As I said earlier, this is not it. This is the working process of artists collaborating. So, William, when you saw this 3D version of the set that you had painstakingly constructed out of cardboard and paper, what was your reaction?
The reaction was, I suppose, God, it's a huge amount of work to do the scanning and get it completely right. But I think I was very encouraged with where we were. I mean, it's very clear which things are not right, which degrees of transparency of skylights and things like that, which look very digital. We are in the world of illusion, but there is a world of one kind of illusion when we look at the cardboard model, and we're in another kind of illusion when that's digitized and scanned. But certainly it's very far on the track for me feeling, okay, this feels certainly a very exciting terrain to work in. If you said that's all it's going to be, it will not be more than that, then we'd all be a little bit skeptical. It's a bit like showing someone a rough cut. You say to them, this is a rough cut, the film's going to be shorter, and they say, I understand that all, but why is it so slow? How can you leave so long on this shot? So I'm a bit anxious about people thinking this is what they're seeing is the piece. It's a piece that has different iterations. So there's a version which is just a film, which is not digitized, which is our camera moving through the model for a Shostakovich film. And then elements of that model and thinking of the puppets become digitized and become the piece we're talking about now. And then there's a part I spoke about earlier, which is a live theater performance of those actual people inside their cardboard costumes. And so in a way it's a broad series of investigations, of which certainly the most unknown, the most complicated and potentially extremely rich one is the digitized 3D world. That's the one I'm least certain of what it will be. That's the most open-ended. But very curious to see how improvisation of the avatars work, what it happens when you put these different things together, operated by people who are improvising together and have a different presence on the world. With them, presumably their performance as humans is shifted enormously by the knowledge that they're going to become or are becoming at the same moment an avatar, and what that avatar does and can't do. It'll work both ways.
So Xander, you are nodding along with the 3D digital version feels like the most unknown, and agreeing with that. What's your response to what William just said?
I think it's a process of exploring what's possible, and that's such a new area, not only for William, but for, I think, making these kinds of experiences in general. Obviously, there's a long history of game studios making immersive experiences that are competitive or multiplayer, but I think as someone who grew up playing games and kind of online, very much online, I think there's different kinds of possibilities for creative experiences using these tools, and that's something we're going to have to discover.
I'm so glad you said that, because I have been thinking about the audience, that there's, I'm imagining a variety of potential audiences, and I'm wondering if you have thought about this also, because there's certainly people who are very comfortable grew up playing games and understand what it's like to operate in that world and would know how to maneuver. Then there's also people who maybe just saw William's exhibition at the Contemporary Art Museum in Boston and are thinking, oh, I know this artist, William Kentridge, I will follow him anywhere. I mean, and then there's audiences who have discovered what it's like to immerse themselves in art on their computers because of the pandemic. So have you thought about where those audiences might intersect?
For me, I'm interested in the work has to make sense for me and the collaborators and the team I'm working with, in the hope that there will be other people who find, who have a similar response to it or similar interest in it. That's why I've worked with either the theatre performances or the visual art exhibitions. But I'm very happy to be guided by Wayne's experience of the different ways of different audiences and different worlds. But I think it's important that the making of it isn't so much made thinking this is what an audience expects or knows, because then you'll be stuck in familiar things and most probably in kinds of games that we can't begin to compete with.
We don't want to compete with games at all. And I think, again, William is the right person to work with us on this. You have one of the things we're connecting with is performance venues and festivals who already have certain kinds of expectations. They're not expecting to come to see a video game. So they're not going to be coming with that kind of baggage. Mm-hmm. They're going to come with an understanding of this is what performance is, this is how performance is being transformed. This is the kind of work that I've seen William do. This is a whole other a language that emerges from the history of what Future Perfect has done and the history of the way William has thought about images and experiences and dialogues between different media coming together. So I think we're being very careful about what kinds of expectations are built into this. And I think being connected to a whole performance world who is used to looking at how new languages emerge, I think it's going to be the right fit. So that's my hope.
I'm wondering if it's a newer discovery that there is also a piece of this now that as I understood it, so correct me if I'm wrong, as I understood it, this was intended to live in the virtual world. And maybe now you're discovering in the art making process, which is so generative and exciting and unknown, that, oh wait, this thing that we thought of for this way is also changing the way we think about live performance and in-person bodies at scale with performer and audience. William, could you say something about whether you anticipated to find a kind of new generative experience in dipping into the digital realm?
There was always a sense that this is a terrain, the idea as I described from the novel Envy of Olesha, and these questions, they've appeared in various film projects that I've done in the past. There's a Shostakovich film which is underway, which is what these models are initially built for, these cardboard models of a Shostakovich symphony. While working on the puppets and the costumes for that, with the costume designer, she was saying that these are also going to be beautiful live. So there was already a sense that maybe there would be a live. We were interested in a Mayakovsky play, and a Mayakovsky play that doesn't really have a place certainly in the Shostakovich Symphony and doesn't really have a place in the, we're not making a piece of theatre in the digital world. It's a different kind of object that we're making. So there was always a sense of, without ever saying, this is how it will be in the live, this is what the film will be, this is what the digital world will be. You don't know if all three of them will act, how they will all happen, but there'll be a flow between them. And I'm certain that what we learn from the digital world will change what happens on stage. What happens on stage will show new possibilities in the film world. The film world will definitely change things of thinking about sound and what we see in the digital world. And for me, that's always been the open-endedness of where one medium stops and another begins, and the movement of an image from one through into another always helps all of them.
Xander and I never, from the very beginning, never felt that the only place for a work like this is to end up in a virtual environment. We're always thinking about constant dialogues in multiple directions. So I think we mirror William's sensibility. We always thought that things can be bi-directional, and that's the way we've always worked. The end is never the virtual. The end is one move toward a process that could then end up, you know, once you get things into digital, they can then be reprinted as physical objects, and those physical objects can be refilmed and then made into animation. I mean, the circularity and the dialogue is intensified, and that's what we're interested in.
I mean, one of the things that I have realized yet again over the past year is that artists will operate in whatever way they can. And if the pandemic meant we couldn't do what we expected, that new things were going to be discovered. So it sounds like for Future Perfect Studio, you thought we need to do this new thing because we are not having the opportunities we thought. So we're going to try this new thing. And that you have found a great partner to think about this experience. So tell us when we might expect to see not this tip of the iceberg, but the iceberg itself.
I don't know. I mean, it depends how simplified and how large it goes. But I think we've got at least 18 months of work ahead, I would say. Just knowing how long things take and the different stages things go through. You know, now that we've seen this, we're ready to start thinking.
We've discussed it as in phases. So we're trying to divide this into chunks of doable things. And so, you know, one chunk we're hoping to get through in November, and that will show certain kinds of, that will show the results of certain kinds of explorations that we're excited about sharing. We are aiming toward a premiere in 2023. So I think we're totally excited in process and in phases that accomplish certain kinds of things for all of us as a team.
I mean, this is the other thing I think oftentimes people who go see live performance and the curtains open and there's the show is that they don't think about the deep kind of research and exploration and time that it takes, especially when investigating new ways of working. I have to say, from here at Jacob's Pillow, we are so excited for your faith in the embodiment of artists and the possibilities that you're presenting for us in new ways in the digital realm. Thanks for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing more.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.